Hello, in today's video we'll be looking at the start of the German Blue Water tree, which is represented by a Leopard, the German reserve destroyer sitting at a BR of 3.7. She does have that BR for a reason, so let's take a closer look. First off, as we usually do, the main armament. 3 single 128mm guns, one in the front of the ship, 2 in the rear in a super firing pair. These guns get the shell choice between high explosive base fuse and high explosive time fuse shells. I highly recommend taking high explosive base fuse shells primarily, as these do quite decent damage to enemy ships, both blue water and coastal. However, the normal high explosive shells do deal more adequately with coastal vessels, as you can't really over penetrate with normal high explosive, whilst you can do that with the base fuse shells. These guns have a reload speed varying between 4.28 and 3.3 seconds, which is quite a fast reload speed even for reserves. Though this is also kind of counteracted by the relatively slow traverse speed of these guns. However, of note, is that the super firing turret in the rear can rotate a full 360 degrees, which can come in handy as it also does have quite good forward firing gun arcs. However, these guns are also large, open gun mounts. They're very vulnerable and very easy to lose when you take any kind of fire. Another thing of note is that these guns have very low ammo capacity. I will say that in most matches you're probably not going to run out of ammo, but I have run out of ammo types, so I suggest taking at least a full ammo load and dividing however you see fit. But these are still strong guns for a reserve, and the primary reason Leopard sits at 3.7. I will also note though that their dispersion at range is kind of poor, but with how you can play the ship that shouldn't be too much of a worry. Next up we have the secondary armament, consisting of 2 single 20mm guns, roughly amidships. These guns each have 40 round magazines, and it takes roughly 5 seconds for one gun to expand its magazine. The reload rate of these guns can vary between 5.2 to 4 seconds, depending on crew skills, which can lead to quite a long downtime before your guns actually start firing again, which is quite important as these guns are your only anti-aircraft guns. They also don't have the best overlapping gun arcs, although it could be worse. Although overall these two 20mm are quite decent as anti-air guns, better than you'd expect even, just don't really rely on them to protect you from all air attacks. Leopard also carries torpedoes in 2 triple launchers. These torpedoes do not have a reload, so it's just the 6 of them, and have a payload of 358.4 kilograms of TNT equivalent. Depending on whether or not you have the torpedo modification equipped, which I highly recommend you don't do, they have a speed of 81 km or 56 km an hour, and a range of 6 to 14 km. The launch arcs of these torpedoes are quite good, although with a limited number of torpedoes you don't really want to be using them all too eagerly. I highly recommend you just use them when you know they will be useful. They do have quite a mediocre traverse speed, which may be a detriment if you're suddenly surprised by a destroyer or bigger blue water vessel, although it shouldn't be too noticeable in most cases. Overall these torpedoes are quite good, although slightly lacking in range. Then, when it comes to the mobility of the ship, her top speed is 54 to 63 km an hour depending on modifications, and she also has quite a good turning circle, as well as good acceleration and deceleration, so overall pretty good mobility. When it comes to the survivability of the Leopard, I already pointed out the very large and weak turrets. Believe me, you'll lose them often. Other than that, she doesn't really have too many vulnerabilities. She has well protected main ammo, they're all quite well below the waterline, and her engines are also surprisingly well protected by her fuel tanks. Although do keep in mind that fuel tanks can be destroyed when they're saturated by damage, so this is not armor you'll keep throughout the entire fight or throughout your entire life in the ship. Overall, she is decently tanky, which also contributes to her BR, as far as I know. When it comes to playstyle, I play the Leopard quite aggressively. However, I do mainly try and hunt down coastal vessels with it. And when I am forced to fight destroyers, I prefer to get as close as possible. These guns really, they feel awkward at longer ranges, so I suggest you try and get close. especially because the torpedoes aren't all that bad, so when you do get close, they might come in handy. But to summarize, the firepower of Leopard is good. Her AA defense is quite lackluster, although it can save you in some situations. Her torpedoes are pretty good. Her mobility is good. Her survivability is surprisingly good. And her playstyle, I recommend being aggressive. Verdict: spaded. When it comes to reserve vessels, I'll usually give it a spaded verdict. There's not much you can do wrong with a ship where you can get 3 spawns, especially if you can spade it. As well as the fact that reserve vessels come with a few modifications already unlocked, it really shouldn't be all that bad. And Leopard should be a pretty good introduction to other German destroyers. So really I do hope you have a good time with it, as I most certainly did. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.